Welcome back, everyone. Our next session for the day is a panel discussion on non athletic careers for women in sport. Our panelists for this discussion are Vrinda Rathi, umpire. She's represented the Mumbai University in cricket from 2008 to 2011. Ms. Rathi has a scoring experience of 10 years. She's qualified as a Mumbai Cricket Association scorer in 2008 and a BCCI scorer in 2010. Further, Ms. Rathi is officiated as domestic cricket matches for over 8 years: ICC Women's World Cup 2013, ICC T20 World Cup Men and Women in 2017, the Indian Premier League from 2015 to 2018, and one ODI match between India and New Zealand in 2017 before moving on to umpiring professionally. She was qualified as a Mumbai CA umpire in 2014 and a BCCI umpire in 2018. Ms. Rathi was inducted into the ICC Development Panel of Umpires in March 2020. We have Neha Aggarwal, Head Partnerships and Communications at Olympic Gold Quest. Ms. Aggarwal was the only female table tennis player to represent India at the 2008 Beijing Olympics Games. She's a gold medalist at the 2008 Commonwealth Youth Games and has won 3 bronze medals at the Commonwealth Table Tennis Championships. She has previously worked at the United States Olympic Committee, International Table Tennis Federation, Women's Sports Foundation, started by tennis legend Billie Jean King. We have Navnita Gautam, sports massage therapist for the Royal Challengers Bangalore IPL franchise. She also works with many professional and amateur cricketers, shooters, and wrestlers in India and in Canada. Ms. Gautam works as an athletic therapist with many golfers who currently play on the European, Asian, and Indian Tour. She started a charity called Hoops for India in 2013 for underprivileged children, which provides them with equal opportunity to play for sports. Ms. Gautam has also worked for the Vancouver Whitecaps FC Tour team with the same athletic therapist capacity. Her breakthrough role came in 2015 FIFA Women's World Cup, which was held in Vancouver. She also took on an opportunity to work as an athletic therapist for Indian women's basketball team at the FIBA Asia Cup in 2017. We also have Chaitanya Sridhar, Dr. Chaitanya Sridhar, lead sports psychologist. She's completed her PhD in sports psychology from the University of Western Australia and has been working in the industry to help athletes and other performers achieve their top performance for over a decade. During her stint in Australia, she's also worked with various cricketers in the domestic and international level. At the Sports Authority of India, she's worked as a scientific officer in the sports psychology development with the national campus across disciplines. She's now consultant with various sporting academies, such as the Inspire Institute of Sport, which supports India's medical prospects at an elite level. We next have Ms. Shweta Haranhalli, who was the captain of the Mumbai Under-19 team that clinched the All India Championship for the very first time. She's led the Mumbai senior women's cricket team to championship in the Azam Shah Cup, their first international tour to Tanzania. She was also at the helm of the Mumbai senior women's cricket team in the domestic circuit. Her journey in the field of writing began in January 2013 as a freelance sports writer for the Midday. She's currently associated as a senior sports analyst for Sportskeeda and consultant for Meraki Sport and Entertainment. Our moderator for the event is Mr. Jonathan Rego, senior sports advisor and a consultant to corporate brands and professional teams alike. He's India's first FIBA player and team agent, and his work has led to projects with the NBA, the BFI, the Mumbai City FC, PSA, Adidas, Bright, HP, Prime Meridian, Apollo Tires Mission 2018, Globosport, and CAA Quan. Now over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Yogita. A couple of minutes ago, I received a message from a well-wisher from London's office, and he said, best of luck. I said, I'm really nervous. He said, why? I said, I have 6 women stars on a panel, and I'm a simple man who's trying to extract value in 1 hour. So actually, Yogita, you've done me a favor by actually going through the achievements of these of our panelists today. So if it's okay with our panelists, I'd like to go straight into some questions of, with regards to your career trajectories as opposed to your introductions, because I see that it's already mentioned in the chat. So, as this is, I feel like this seminar in general, this year's SLPC and this panel is a very educative one. So I'm going to take us back to school, and because I can't figure out which of you panelists to go to first, I'm going to go in alphabetical order. So which means And Neha Aggarwal, I'm going to put you on the spot and start with the first question with you. What are some of the challenges that Indian aspirants who are looking for an opportunity in sports management face? I'm sure, as somebody who has pursued a sports management degree outside of India and has returned to India to use what you've learned domestically, what are some of the challenges you feel young sports management professionals and aspirants face when they, whether it's talking to their parents, whether it's looking for opportunities, whether it's having conversations with potential employers, or whether it is even finding opportunities? What do you feel are those challenges?
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. I think the first biggest question, which I see a lot of young grads who've just graduated from college and wanting to move to sports ask is that does sports management degree make sense or not? Right? Should they be, say, if they're interested in sport and they've been following sports, so their basic question is that should they move towards sports management or say pursue an MBA or BBA or try to work after their graduation. So they still don't know that an education in sports management is worth it, is needed to find employment in the Indian sports ecosystem or not. And I think it's a very fair challenge because our industry is growing, and while you need to know sport, you need to know the nuances of sport, but I truly believe that you also need other skill set which will help you in excelling in your day-to-day job. Say if you're within communications or within marketing or within law or finance, you need to know the basics of these subjects first than being an avid sport and enthusiast. So that is something which I see a lot of young folks not paying attention to and not realizing, and rather than being very very enthusiastic about knowing sport and working in the sports industry. And then a lot of them also fear of does the sports industry pay well or not, should we go abroad and get experience there, and things like that. And I generally I try to give them the right picture. If you compare within India and outside of India, say in Europe or the US, definitely the industry doesn't pay equivalent to what it would pay in Europe or the US. But if you're a sports enthusiast, I think no better place to be in the industry, because if you're doing something you love and you're getting paid for it, I think that's a great career opportunity, and brings. I'm sure it'll also bring a lot of happiness to you if you're able to do something which you're passionate about.
I think my first question hit the nail on the head. So I'm actually slightly happy with myself because you said something that actually resonates a lot with me as well, Neha, which is sports management or working in sport is essentially taking what already exists in the real world and applying to sport, right? So in that context, you mentioned the word skill set, right? So sports law is nothing but law, which is law in the general world that is applied to sport, of course, by layering what regulations, federations, and associations put together. So that takes me to my next question for Navnita. You have a very unique skill set, which is you are a sports rehabilitation recovery massage therapist. It's something that we've heard of massage therapists, we've heard of rehabilitation therapists, but you specifically do it for sports individual, and you have an enviable track record. I can't even, I don't think we'll have enough time to get through all of it. But this is still, as we actually saw in the previous panel, sports globally and even in India is still heavily dominated by men and male sports. As a female therapist, as a woman therapist in this space, what are some of the challenges you faced, and what are the mental models you apply to overcome these barriers that may exist when, say, for example, engaging a woman therapist?
So first of all, thank you, Jonathan, Yogita, and then Shannon, Vani, and the whole team behind for this lovely event to take place. So honestly, I get this question asked a lot, and I would say there's not much challenges. The group of guys, especially that I work with, are very kind, respectful, and really, really encouraging. And especially the seniors and the captains and whichever team environment that I'm in, they're very professional and super kind to me. So I've never really had an issue. If I really had to pick, I just had to be more mindful and understanding in terms of when an athlete needs their space, which is closer to the game time in terms of they have their own schedule and ritual, which I gotta respect. And when they're free and just need a helping hand, then I'm there as well. But otherwise, there's not much challenges as long as you're there to perform a duty and help them get to their goals in terms of they need some work done on their bodies to perform for the match tomorrow. As long as you stick within those guidelines, and I'm fortunate to have really good support staff too that are really encouraging with my work as well and trusting my work.
I'm pretty certain it's very encouraging to hear that your experience has been largely positive, and I'm sure the people who are watching this will take home that there is actually a very large tendency to focus on what's not working in the sports industry. And while there's a long way to go, the previous panel mentioned we are still taking baby steps. There's a long way to go. It's definitely encouraging to celebrate the small wins, right? So for a therapist such as yourself to say that there is a culture of respect and boundaries that has been created in the sports industry in India, and the people that you worked with is definitely encouraging. So I'm going to take that and move from you onwards to Shweta. Shweta, you've been an active player just like some of our panelists here, and you've gone from an active playing career to being a journalist and being a consultant. What has that journey been like? Because now you're getting an opportunity to see the sports world from both angles. You've seen it as an active player from that side, and you're now on this side, which is covering sports and consulting for sport. What are some of the key lessons you've learned on that transition?
Sports, especially cricket, has always been an integral part of my life. Growing up, I have an elder brother, so I developed my love and passion for the game, playing endless hours of gully cricket with him and his friends. I started my journey in cricket with Complan, an initiative with Sandeep Patil, and graduated to playing for Mumbai, leading Mumbai. But for me, the transition from actively playing to coming into journalism has been probably I started in 2013 with the ICC Women's World Cup that was staged in Mumbai with Midday. I was incredibly fortunate to have one of the best mentors in Clayton Mazzano. He guided me through all the initial days of, when I was very new to this field, with a lot of exposure of Ranji Trophy matches, age group cricket, and a lot of IPL. All along, I've been associated with Sportskeeda. I think the transition has, working on one of the biggest things I feel is being associated with the sport as a player has always helped me write in-depth analysis of the game and being connected to the sport. What for me started as a passion of writing and being involved in the sport is now slowly turning out to be my full-fledged career option.
Well, I have a soft corner for journalism, as you probably know from my background. So I'm going to be, I may be a little biased towards Shweta for sure. But moving forward, one of the things that I've also had as an experience is working with a professional football team in a live professional league, which was the good fortune I had of working with Mumbai City FC and working with the leagues. So I'm going to move on to Vrinda. Vrinda, we always hear players and match officials, right? When we're talking about operation setups and stuff like that, players and match officials. Now, can you kind of bust the myth of why are match officials so important as players? Because whenever we, as an operations guy, every instruction that came from above was like, you got to take care of players and match officials. So what does if you can in a very short, brief way, explain what encapsulates match officials and what are the scope of duties that say some of the people who are attending this session can aspire to kind of turn into professions.
Yeah, firstly, thank you for having me here. And as you asked that, what is the connection? The thing is, yes, the game is for the players and the players are the most important integral part of the game. Without the players, there's nothing. But for the conduct of the game, of course, you need the officials. The officials are the essence. So if I take cricket, you need an umpire. You need that two human beings standing there, officiating the game, giving their decisions. Then you need scorers to record the game, to record everything that is happening so that later on when you see back, you have the stats ready. You have the video analyst, you have the broadcasters who record the game, who telecast the game. So yes, that is why the officials are very highly mentioned. As you said, after the players, it is the officials, because they are the one who actually help you to conduct the game smoothly. So that is why probably the officials are really placed high.
Great. And now we'll kind of move on to what happens in the back end scene. Like you said, players are on the field, they're in front, and of course a handful of match officials definitely you get to see, whether it's referees and an umpire. However, there's a lot that goes on as preparation in the back end. There's a lot of match officials you do not see, as a matter of fact. But off the field, there's something else that a lot of us don't see, and is actually a conversation that's been raised in the times that we are in over the past 2 years, which is mental health. So I want to move on to Dr. Chaitanya and ask her, what is it that took you towards sports psychology specifically, right? Psychology, as we all know, is a very, very important part of understanding just human existence and where we are, why we do what we do and how we do it. And but specifically in sport, where the difference between winning and losing is so tiny, where the difference between joy and sadness is actually so tiny. What are some of the elements? Psychology plays a very important role. So what are some of the things that drew you from doing just general psychology for the general population towards sports psychology specifically?
Thank you, Jonathan. Can you hear me clearly? Yeah.
Yes.
And actually, the question took me because I was just listening to everyone, and interestingly, sports psychology actually chose me. It wasn't the other way around, because I was pursuing my degree in clinical psychology. I actually have a master's, and I had to be coaxed to go for the interview at Psy Center Bangalore, the first one, the research fellow. But then it shifted. I just really enjoyed the interview. But my love for sport was from way before. I was an athlete, and my father was in sport. So, the love for sports then propelled me forward. And that interview, I have to say, was, I think it went on for more than an hour. And I realized that I really like this place. And those 2 years inside, that gave me that basis to everything, just it inculcated everything in sports psychology, from teaching to research to performance to working with the support staff, athletes, and teams. So that's what got me in. I think your personality also really depends. So the love for sports. And I think the key factor was when you get down, right? I think I might differ a little here. Is you might have a lot of knowledge, but at the end of the day, at least with sports side, it's no one's interested in your theories. Ma'am, just tell me this, kya karu? You need to be like at the spur of the moment, and none of your theories, you don't have time. So it's a lot of presence, like I think someone was saying here, mindfulness. You really have to be mindful as to what's required at this point of time. So I have to say, and there was one more factor there, because when I was a research fellow, we used to have this assembly. So everyone had to have a fall in at 5:45 inside. And though I lived in Bangalore, I had to stay on the campus. And I think that's where you really actually observe a lot. And this was one advice I got from Dr. MP Ganesh, who we all know is a former Olympian and coach. That, the more you're on the ground, that's where science and, sport meet. It has to come together, because that's when you're seeing an embodied, when we think of our best performance, right, be it in sport or any aspect of life, your mind and body is not separate. And I think that's the key factor as to where am I? Do I bring myself? And what does this individual and this team require? Also, what do the coaching staff, if you notice someone's actually unconsciously or they're unaware that they're pulling down, even actually informing or recognizing that sometimes a message might be better off coming from a coach. And in panels like this, also getting across the message. So I think in one line, if I have to put it, Jonathan, it was The Road Not Taken. Definitely by Robert Frost. And I think but making that choice to come back from Australia was something I made. So that's what I want to say.
Thank you, Doctor. I must say this panel is fantastic because each of you all are pushing me, giving me a absolute transition into my next question. So my next question actually is to Neha. And two things that specifically Dr. Chaitanya said. One is, "Main kya karu?" And the second one is about coming back to India. So the most common question you hear from those who aspire to have a career in sport is, do I do a sports management degree or do I not do a sports management? It's the first question they ask, right, before they get a job. And partly the reason, actually, I would say a large part of the reason is, as a country and as a culture, we still lay a lot of emphasis on education, and those positives and negatives can be discussed some other time. But Neha, I think I'm going to ask you a two-part question. The first part of it is, what made you decide to specifically do sports management as opposed to any other degree, and you could still use those skill sets, in sport? And the second part of the question is, what was there a reason why you chose an international degree versus working in India, or was there a profound reason, or was it just a matter of logistics, saying that was just a better opportunity?
Sure. So to answer your first question, that why I chose sports management and not any other degree, because I had been an athlete all my life, and I knew that when I chose to retire, and then I knew that when I moved to into administration and management, I would need a 360-degree skill set, right? I would not only need the knowledge of how sport is governed. So right now, at that point, all I knew sport is from an athlete's perspective, and which is very, very limited being an athlete, because we're always so focused. You have no idea what's going at the back to make all this thing happen, to conduct a tournament and whatnot, right? So for me to have that perspective, and at the same time, again, being an athlete, all I did was, I mean, I was a good student, but to be a good administrator, I had to brush up my skill sets big time. So for that, I knew that I needed a sport management degree to get the dual perspective, and I've always laid a lot of emphasis to the kind of institutions I've gotten into. So for that, I wanted to again go to the best institutions, because being part of an ecosystem where you choose to study, you choose to be associated with, is also very, very important, in terms of your profile, in terms of the people you interact with, in terms of the relationships that you make, and the networking that you get to do. So from DPS Arkipuram, where I did my school, to St. Stephen's College for my graduation, I knew that I wanted to, aim for an Ivy League university. And also, in 2007, there was the Junior World Championship in the US, and it was held in Stanford University. So that's where, we played in the university. So I got to see what sort of, what is the infrastructure like, what a little bit of feeler onto how this works in the US. So I always had that in my mind, that I would want to go to the US and study there. And honestly, that was one of the best 1.5 years of my life, and it was such a smooth transition from being an athlete into management. The sort of relationships I was able to make, made lifelong friends, and also the kind of exposure I got, from the top four leagues based in New York City, to working at the United States Olympic Committee, in the helm of US Olympic sports. I think that the exposure was very, very rich, and something which I will always cherish when I look back. What was your second question again, Jonathan? If you could please.
So I think that you answered the second question, but you can probably add to it, which is, was there a specific reason you chose studying abroad versus studying in India? Or was there a profound reason, or was it just purely an inherent intuition or a gut feeling that this is where I'd like to go?
Yeah. So yeah, like I mentioned already, and also I did this in 2015, 2016. So at that time, say 4 or 5 years back, there weren't enough good institutions that I would want to go to. So I think my choice was to move to the US. I want to admit that I was at some point confused that should I go for MBA or should I go for sports management? But like I started by saying that I needed a 360-degree view of an understanding of what sports and management looks like. It was a very, very obvious choice that it's better to go for sports management than for MBA.
Great. Picking up from what we just spoke about with you, which is picking your institution, looking at an education, I just want to move on to Navnita now. Navnita, when we think of, when the layman, and when I'm going to take myself out of the equation here because I worked in sport, but let's say a lay person hears a sports therapist or a massage therapist or a recovery and rehab. All they can think of is, a white room with, some very complex medical equipment, and you lying on a bed, and somebody just kind of, fixing your muscles, or there's a very simplistic view. But I'm sure it's a far more complex process, right? To get to that process, there is obviously a certain amount of education that one would need. It's not as simple as, hey, if you've got a sore muscle, let me just help you by massaging it. There is a certain amount of education and certification you require. There are a lot of people I've come across during my course of work in sport who want to break in, people who are interested in the physiology of sport. They've been active athletes and they want to get into the physiology of sport. What are some of the certifications you would have to take? And if you can also expand on the fact that are there differences in the certifications that are required to work in India versus working abroad as well, right? So that's a two-part question, which is one, what are the certifications you would require? What's the education you require? And the second part is there a difference between what you require to work in India versus what you require to work abroad?
Oh, awesome question. So when it comes, I'm originally from Vancouver, in Canada, and right there, it is recommended that after high school to do a 4-year degree in some sort of science-related topic. So whatever, bachelor's of science, bachelor of health science. I did my bachelor's of kinesiology, and from there, which is the study of movement. Once I finished that, then there was an option to do a 2-year intensive program for massage therapy school. And with that in mind, you have to do close to 2,000 hours of hands-on practical work. But I chose the other stream. So after my 4-year degree, I went for another 4-year degree, and I did athletic therapy because I wanted to be a mix of everything. And if there are teams, I want them to be like, hey, I have everything out of my pocket, and whichever works for your team, ideally. So I did 4 years kinesiology, then 4 years athletic therapy. And from athletic therapy, during my degree, I did certifications in massage therapy, soft tissue release, and functional range release, and all the other complicated, cool stuff when it comes to any sort of muscle work. And I really, really started enjoying that the most. And so I did a lot of post-degree certifications. And after completing my athletic therapy, you have to write some sort of certification exam for your state or province. So doing that, followed by you have to write one for your nation as well. So for the Canadian exam, Excel as well. And once you are certified, then every year you have to keep up with some sort of CEU credits, which is continuing education units, which tells you that you're up to date with the latest technique, latest information. And from then on, you are still registered. So I'm still registered from back home, from Canada as well. But I work in India. And in India, what I've noticed so far, it's almost 4 years in India now. And it's picking up, the soft tissue work, the manual work is picking up definitely. But in terms of institution-wise, yes, that is the future plan, is to eventually build that really well in India. And so to conclude, it's either doing a 4-year science degree and then doing 2 years of massage therapy, or you can do my track, which I did 4 more years with post certifications at the end, and just writing some exams at the end just to make sure you're up to date with everything. And and then keeping up with the CEU credits.
Thank you, Navnita. As a matter of fact, I have some. I wouldn't say some. I have some insight because I worked with Mumbai City FC, and I had the fortune of working with the head physiotherapist, Dr. Sandeep Korale, who was a good friend. And this is a man who is who understands the body very deeply. He's at the top of his game. But I would often see him at 7 o'clock at breakfast, everybody's enjoying breakfast. He's like going through his iPad and learning stuff. And I was like, you've not stopped studying? I mean, how are you studying still? And he's like, Jonathan, you never stop studying. Well, it's a choice you make now, So, thanks for that perspective. I'm going to move on to Shweta. Shweta, we've come from Neha, we've gone to Navnita, where formal education has played a very interesting part in transitioning them from the life of a non-sports management professional now to working actively in sport. You've had a slightly different path. You've done some work, but you largely stepped into your professional position right now through the freelance path. Basis your interaction with, basis your work till now, do you feel that was a path that you would still take? What are the advantages of that? And now that more stuff has opened up in terms of education opportunities, more institutions that are offering sports journalism an option, would you take a different path today?
I personally feel media plays a very important role in forming and changing the mind and opinion of the people. For me, as an athlete, all these years, I was very focused on developing and getting better at my game and improving each day. But right now, because I've been, in the freelance setup for close to 8-9 years now, and I personally feel learning the art from one of the best mentors or one of the best institutes will always help in the overall development of the person. I think I've been studying and doing a master's degree from London School of Journalism, and over the course of the syllabus, I've realized that the syllabus actually provides me with a lot of nitty-gritties on how you go about researching and writing a good copy. In addition to it, I think once you have a formal degree or an education in the field of journalism, you will be better equipped, technically when you come out and study and pursue your dream. So I think that is one of the biggest advantages. For me personally, I did not have, because I was very busy playing matches, focusing on tours and everything of that kind. But now when I have time and everything, I still go back, study a lot and do a lot of my assignments. So that really helps me.
Thanks for that, Shweta. Moving on to Vrinda, these are two unique experiences, right? You have Neha and Navnita who had to do quite a bit of formal education to make that transition. And then you have Shweta who says that now she's pursuing that formal education, but wish she had the opportunity to do so earlier. Match officials, because the concept of the topic is so broad, is very different. It's not something you can encapsulate in one, right? Because you have the referees, for example, who they might need qualifications, but they also need to be really physically fit. I remember while one of the matches I was at Mumbai City FC, and we were talking to the referees, and I believe there was a referee who was 42 or 43 years old. He looked like he was 22. Whether it was his ability to be able to run, whether to be fit. So it's not just as simple as what is your formal education. It's also about what are some of the physical requirements you can meet to perform certain match official roles, right? There are some match official roles where you don't need that, like a match commissioner, for instance. So if you can, Vrinda, for the people who are watching, the attendees, would it be able for you to encapsulate what are both educational requirements and some of the physical requirements you require to become a match official, not just in India, but even globally as well?
So I'll start with how to become a match official. Probably there are, as you said, there are different kinds of roles. So there's a match referee, there are umpires in the match, the scorers, and there are video analysts. So when we talk about match referee, so the match referee in cricket and in football is completely different. The football match referee is the one who actually is on the field running. And the match referee in cricket is the one who actually takes care of the game, who runs or conducts the game smoothly. So the match referee, to become a match referee in India, the main criteria is you have to be a state player or you should have played India. So this is the basic requirement to transform into a match referee. And whereas when you see the other three fields I've mentioned as umpires, scorers, and video analyst, in India, you don't really need any prerequisites. You just have to be 18 plus. So for umpiring and scoring, basically, you have to first appear the exams conducted by your state. So every state has their own examination. Every association will have their examinations, which you have to first clear that. And with experience and with time, when there is an opportunity in BCCI, or when there's an opening in BCCI, they conduct the exams for BCCI level for the domestic tournaments. So once you're on the state panel, you actually start doing the local matches. You cover the matches played in your own place. Then you gradually transform into the like as a BCCI official. So to become a BCCI official, the main thing is you need to have patience, because the exams are not really regularly. It's a very limited number of requirement there. So that is why the exams would be few and far in between. So the main criteria is, again, just have some patience and you'll go through it. And when the exams come, for scoring, it is just one exam you have to clear and you become a BCCI scorer. But in umpiring, there is actually two levels. That is level 1, which is only with the MCC laws. And there is level 2, which again has two parts, the theory and the practicals, which the passing is 90 marks. So you need to really get through that part. And once you become that, you start doing the domestic matches in India. And for video analysts, again, as of now, we don't have any state association conducting private exam, like the association exams, but the BCCI directly conducts exams for them. So to become a video analyst, and same, you don't require any formal education, or it's not compulsory, or you don't even need to be a player. If you have interest and there's an opening, the association has to recommend your name. And coming back, sorry, I forgot the second part you asked me.
So essentially, now that you become an official, like there are certain qualifications, both in terms of qualification and physical requirements, right? So for instance, a lot of people who are absolutely unaware, and that's one of the reasons we do this SLPC conferences, to make people aware of what actually happens in sport, right? So when somebody looks at a cricket official, they're like, oh, this person just stands around the whole day. But I would actually encourage anybody to stand for 45 minutes in the same place and try not shifting your weight from one foot to the other, and then call me and tell me how easy that was, right? So there are obviously, it is a physically demanding role, right? I'm not talking about the officials who sit inside, but otherwise it's a physically and mentally demanding role. So are there some physical requirements that you may have to go through for, say, becoming a match official in cricket?
Yes. So as you just mentioned that the guys who are sitting may not be that physically fit, but I would differ from this, because being stationed at one place for 6 hours, minimum 6 hours, recording ball by ball, everything in detail, you need to be very physically fit so that you're mentally fit and you're focused onto the game. Because at times, after one and a half hour, you start fidgeting with things that you become restless. It's difficult to sit there and actually record everything without missing a single ball, because everything is what you are doing there behind the desk is very important. So yes, it is important for both, even the three guys who are sitting, the match referee, the scorers, and the video analyst. These three guys will normally be sitting outside. And for the umpires, I would say the job actually warrants continuous traveling the length and breadth of the country. So long standing hours, again, minimum 6 hours, could sometimes go to 7 hours. Then coming back the next day, doing the same thing again. So with this, you also have the extreme conditions. So I could just give an example. This week, probably I'm doing a match in Kashmir, where the temperature would be 8, 9, 10 degrees. The next week, I'm going to Chennai, where the temperature is suddenly 45 degrees. So to get accomplished with that, we really need to be physically fit, so that your body just takes the process and it is easy to transform into, like, from one place to another place. So being physically fit as an umpire is really important. Then you have to make decisions. As you mentioned, it's not just standing there on your 2 feet. It is, you have to make the decisions. So you need the concentration and the focus to be very high. And
something I learned. Sorry for interrupting.
Sorry, I just since this is a forum for women and like we are trying to promote. So there's one more thing, like as a women athlete or an official, like this is a thing, like it has come before also, but I'll again mention that it's not just the physical thing for a female, I would say, like, because every month we have to go through the menstrual cycles, and it could be challenging at times, and it could sometimes be while you're traveling, or it could sometimes be when you're into a multi-day match. So for this, we really need to be prepared, and we should know our body clock so that we can be prepared and aware about it. So that when it happens, we just don't panic and we just don't feel like running away. So this is really important. And thanks to BCCI for this, that they have really the setup there, and the facilities, hygiene facilities available on those domestic matches are really good. So at least at the grounds, we don't have to worry about the hygiene part of the game, but you just need to be aware of your own self to go through it. So being for sometimes it really happens that you don't feel like moving. You just don't feel like you'll be having cramps or you'll be having pains. So to just go through this, you need to be mentally fit so that when the physical part is down, the mental things just help you push through at least that session or that hour or that journey. So I would say it is a combination of both to be mentally and physically fit for a match official.
Thank you so much for highlighting those 2 points, because Vrinda, the idea is, as a man, I will never understand what a woman goes through, right? But it is our duty as we are, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. The sports industry is male dominated. At the very least, we need to encourage conversation to get an understanding of what are the things that we can put in place to make your lives easier or make your life simpler. None of you guys, and this is as you're all sports people, none of you are asking for the easy way out. You're just asking for the fair way out, right? Just make sure things are as fair and as neutral as possible. And thank you for highlighting that. It's something that I believe I will take away from this session today as well. Moving on to Dr. Chaitanya, again, like I said, you guys are making it a little too easy, which is Vrinda spoke about the ability of being both mentally and physically fit, right? As somebody who works in a industry or a part of human society, which is psychology, which has multiple specializations, right? Outside multiple specializations. Do you have those specializations specifically within sports as well? Because in India, we've just started talking about mental health. The conversation, so it's a very young conversation. The conversation in sport on mental health is even younger. So have we gotten to that stage in Indian sport where we are talking about mental health through specializations? And what are some of the qualifications or certifications available out there to enable someone to build a career in those specializations?
Vrinda, I think I really have to, I also had a lot of takeaway from the whole panel. And especially, I think what she said, because my research took in organizational, personal, and cricketers, but I just did not have access to umpires. So having said that, like you said, Jonathan, I think I have to mention this one incident where, when I started in Sai, athletes, I remember one particular basketball player, especially, she would hide and come, she would hide and come via the physio department to the psychology because her coach did not believe. So, and I remember one of my favorite sports psychologists in US, Dr. Kenneth Raveza, he said, this is how we met, with folded arms. So, you're not getting a red carpet welcome. So we, as a society as well, right, we have a very machoistic, and especially with sport, it's like, I'm okay. Sometimes it's heartbreaking. I know this athlete is not okay, and they'll try to convince you they're okay. And I tell them, if you can't tell me, this is in a closed space. So, and I think for us to become okay with not always being okay, I think that is the first step. And especially if you look at something like, we have this habit of copying so much from the West, and with all due respect, you've got a lot from it. If you look at Australian sport, the key word is vulnerability. And this is still just even trickling down in India. Whereas here, even when it's a mental health issue, coaches will say, Chaitanya, if you can't do this, or doc, you can't do this, I'll handle. And you're talking of someone who's written something about suicide in his book. So, I wanted to highlight this issue. Having said that, psychology and sports psychology, at least over the past decade, has taken precedence. In terms of specialization, there are quite a few. Like if you look at it myself, you have to have an undergrad and master's. Minimum is master's, and then you have an experience. And I think in India, what is especially needed is accreditation, because people will go do a sports psychology workshop and then they'll say I'm a sports psychologist. So they end up doing a lot of damage to the field and then you have to undo that damage. So, that was something I really do want to highlight. Having said that, yes, of course, there is at least to what I know is around 4 or 5. One is performance, right? We're looking at sport and performance. Second, an area which is taking a lot of precedence is fitness. So, you actually, at least it's sport and exercise science. So if you specialize in that, you can also look at fitness, right? Then you have the clinical and counseling aspect, because just the amount of pressure. I mean, we all know that what Robin Uthappa spoke of, at the highest point of his career, he wanted to jump out. And I was just sitting with my heart almost in my mouth. Thankfully, he had support. So you have those who specialize, I think especially COVID times, we've had a lot of psychologists who work with hospitals dealing with the clinical aspect. And knowing like when, I know this athlete is tipping towards the clinical end of depression or anxiety, and knowing that, okay, I transfer them on. I don't let go. I'm going to handle this. Then you have the academic and research. And then, of course, also where it comes into lead psychology or high performance, where you consult with academies. And, you work as, so there you're bringing, like, I think what Neha was saying, the 360-degree approach, because it's a top down, it's not just the bottom down. So I would say, yes, there are multiple options available. And also, mostly what is important is, what am I bringing here? Vrinda was saying, it's mentally taxing. I always say, you're sitting in a pressure cooker. So, a lot of people see only the glitz and glamour, and especially with psychology, when your team goes down, when your athlete is down, someone has, an injury, career-ending injury, or injures just before a major tournament. You have to hold space that time. And the point is, so, are you okay with this? It's like, so I always tell people, don't get into sports psychology because you like XYZ player, but, there are various avenues to do that. But the point is, what's your philosophy? What's your personality? And then test the waters, really test it. The best experience, I think, like what Neha was saying, was to get an internship. When I get a lot of offers, people asking me, I always say, go to an academy and see the 360, see what's really happening, and see what do you bring and what does the field bring to you. So I think that becomes very vital.
Thank you for that.
I just want to make a comment here that, being an athlete and now working with athletes, I have to say that there are very, very few good sports psychologists in our country, and very few female sports psychologists that are doing very well. So thank you for doing, Dr. Chaitanya, what you're doing, and hope you do well and, help more and more athletes of our country.
Thank you, Neha.
Thank you for that, Neha. As a matter of fact, I know for a fact that we've come a while away for sports psychology, because I remember very, very, I think probably about 6 or 7 years ago, I'd watched, it was a sit down of conversation on a lawn with a very famous, a top male boxer from our country, and a couple of former boxers as well. And they were sitting and they were talking about mental health. And this boxer who was just past his prime, he had actually started to kind of retire and take. He's like, when I was at my peak, I had troubles that I was really looking for help with, and a lot of people just told me, well, just man up. It's all fine. You can move ahead. I want to pick up from something that Dr. Chaitanya said and come back to you, Neha, which is, it's related. It's similar. It's connected, but it's not related. Which is, we often, as the Indian sports industry, we tend to look at the West as a perfect set example, right? I myself, and I will admit that I was guilty at one point of time when I used to ask this question: if somebody has worked abroad or has experienced the Western, culture of sport, what is it that India can learn? Whereas the truth is that it's a mutual learning, right? The West can learn something from us, and we can learn something from the West. I'm going to come very specifically to a question that a lot of our attendees ask, which is, when I look for jobs, right, whether I study abroad or whether I study in India, what should I be aiming for when I look for a job? So should I be aiming to look for a job in the West, where in general the sporting culture is much more evolved, or should I be looking for something in India where, as you had mentioned, while the pay may not be comparable, you're actually part of building building blocks and building a base for a very, very robust sports industry in India. So when a young person who has gone through the education, we just discussed education and certifications and paths of getting into sports, but now a young person is looking to take his or her first step into sport. What does a young woman think of when it looking for jobs opportunities in sports management specifically, because that's the area that you cover?
Sure. I think it really depends on, firstly, what stage of your life and career you're at. So, if you're a young graduate from an Indian university, I would say work in the sports industry first before going for a master's or say an MBA or whatever. Why that is important? Because that will help you understand what are your areas of interest, and secondly, what are your strengths and weaknesses. Say a young graduate would not really know that are they interested in sports journalism or sports marketing or law or partnerships. What is it that within sports specifically you want to do? It's very hard to understand, right? So get the on ground experience, do internships, even if they don't pay well, if you have time in your life to go through that, do it, get the grind in, learn from that experience, and then then you could possibly think of going for a sports management degree, or continuing with your job or not. And why I say that, because it depends, again, you want to be in India or abroad. To be able to secure a job outside of India without a formal education from a foreign university, it's very hard. Say if you're having a master's degree in sports management from the US, Canada, or anywhere in Europe, you would still have potential to get employment within those particular countries. However, if you have your education in India and want to look for jobs abroad, it's very hard. Secondly, a lot of visa issues, and now with the pandemic kicking in, it's just very hard for companies to give employment to people coming from engineering and other backgrounds. So sport is far, far away. When I was in the US, that was one of the biggest questions. Being an Olympian and having an Ivy League degree, still, the question of visa was the biggest question for every employer, right? Would they want to invest so much in you, or rather invest in their local who would at least stay in their country? So that is one thing which is very, very uncertain. So if you have an education from a university from outside of India, and if you're a true Indian sport lover, I would say get the education, go for a couple of internships. If you're able to get a job, very well. But I think come back and then look for a job in India would be very, very good. But if you're if you're studying in India, just nothing more than hands-on experience on the ground. So get that, and then think about if you want to do a master's course, or if you want to do MBA. I would also want to add here is that, once sport, right, from various perspective, I think very, very important is to have the skill set which I mentioned at the first in my opening comment, because a lot of young people think that they need to understand sport, which is true, but they overlook the fact that they need to be skilled as well. And I think it's the other way around. You need to be very, very skilled to do the specific job that you need to. Say you need to be skilled in digital, in social, in marketing, if you're into that space in sports, rather than really knowing who's more about Olympic sports. That's something you will learn if you're so passionate about, and you would have known a bit about Indian and world sports overall.
Thank you for that, Neha. Same question to you, Navnita. I think, but if we can be a little more specific, because sports physiotherapy and sports rehabilitation is such a vast field. Let's say there's a young aspiring physiotherapist in our panel. What would you advise her would be the first job or the first role she should look for that can help her climb and step up? Because physiotherapy as a field, because of its connection with medicine, is a very hierarchical field. You have to actually take one step at a time as opposed to jumping multiple steps ahead. So what would be the first direction or role or position a young aspiring physiotherapist would have to look for?
Gotcha. So in India, you can, right after high school, a bachelor's of physio would be ideal. And right after you've completed that, then do not go straight into your master's. Take the time. I agree with Neha in terms of take the time, go hands-on experience. Practicality is huge. Get as much teams as you can, reach out. A majority of the teams that I've worked with, I just emailed or called them just to get that access. And I think a lot of, and I worked for free for a lot of years. That I think that has taught me a lot and to what I am today. And another way around, if one really wants to pursue his or her master's, then I feel like one should always go out of India once at least, but do come back because India has a lot to offer. And I feel like the athletes here will cherish it even more if you do come back. And that'd be my only recommendation is after your bachelor's, whether you do want to do your massage therapy after some sort of 4-year degree, take some hands-on experience, learn what you actually really, really want to do. If you want to work more clinical, if you want to work with more on sports, what are the demands of the sports in terms of how many tours, how many, where do you want to go, high performance or just local? And that'll really guide you in terms of, where to go from there.
So, once again, I'm going to take the lazy route here and go to Shweta now. So same question, Shweta. You have journalism is actually a very tough field. I fortunately, unfortunately, I had personal experience in that space. So what does a young aspiring journalist who, let's say, for example, she has had the opportunity to go through journalism school, something that you said that you didn't have an option. So she's just stepped out of journalism school. It's the last day of journalism school. How does she look forward into stepping into the world of journalism or sports journalism?
Yeah, I think just continuing to what we were discussing right now, I think what works the best is having a lot of on-ground experience, a lot of internships. So for what works the best for me is covering everything about cricket, right from your age group cricket to local tournaments. Essentially, it's very important that we understand and identify what our core strengths and what is the core competency is, and then try and improve and try and be the best version of yourself. As a professional, once you understand this is your strong subject and you have a command over your subject, it becomes a lot easier. For me as a freelancer, it becomes a lot easier when I pitch ideas to various publications, knowing I have complete understanding of the subject. Determining what to write for you. And, for me, what works the best is even when I was not covering any games or not writing for any publication, if there was any match that was happening on the television, I would sit and write like an analyst because I've led Bombay. So as a captain, what I would do, okay, this is something that I would have done. Why has such a thing happened? So all these understandings and analyzing and writing a lot of sample articles really worked well for me. But I think the first step for anybody and everybody would be get your on-ground experience and then understand what you want to do, in which field you want to go to.
Thank you for that, Shweta. Vrinda, I'm going to come next to you, but more than I want to actually ask you a question that's come from the audience, because I feel while the question of career is important, I feel this is an interesting question. And if that's okay with you, I'd like to ask you that question.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. So this question, and I hope I'm pronouncing the name right. This question comes from Gautam Gavankar, right? And I'm going to read his question verbatim, which is, in a gender neutral portfolio, like a match official, right? A match official is a gender neutral portfolio. How comfortable or uncomfortable is it to be highlighted as a woman official, right? As opposed to just saying this is an official, how comfortable or uncomfortable are you being highlighted as a woman official? And is the attention distracting at all?
So yes, I would say, actually there are two parts from my personal experience. I'll say how I feel about it. So when I started, or when I transited from my playing career to the official field, as Neha really mentioned, that one needs to be aware of their own skill set. So my transition only happened because I knew the limitation of my playing career, the skill set I had. So I transferred into like, I just got into the officiating field. So at the beginning, yes, it was a bit, I would not say annoying, but it was not very comfortable when people used to just stare at you ki, ladki aayi hai. Like, I'm sitting on the desk for scoring and छोटे छोटे बच्चे लोग from the school team, they'll just come out, लड़की है बाहर, लड़की है बाहर. So I was like, okay. So initially, yes, that used to make me a little uncomfortable. Probably it was new to them also because they have never seen a woman sitting there or officiating there as an umpire. So yes, initially they had that doubts or maybe like, what could this girl do it, or is she capable of doing it? But later on, as the years went and as we started doing it regularly and more females came in, there were more female umpires and of scorers in Mumbai. So this slightly started changing. Even the males started, like, even in the club matches, initially the way guys used to talk to us is like, ladki hai. I have also had the comment of umpire scorer ko khada kar diya hai, MC ke paas umpires nahi hai lagta hai. So I have heard those comments, which sometimes I really did not enjoy. Like, you could term me as an umpire rather than ladki ko khada kiya hai ya scorer ko laake khada kar diya hai karke. But surely this is changing. It will take time, but it is changing. And I'll give credits to MCA and the BCCI, where like the two associations where I am really involved in, at least in the official part, I'd say it is really gender neutral thing. We really don't feel that, like, at least from the people around us. Yes, from the teams, from the players' point of view, but at the professional level, they don't really think this is like, it's a girl or a boy standing there. It's an umpire. It's a scorer. So now things are changing, unlike before, because probably they are aware, probably there are more females out there, probably the ICC and the BCCI are promoting women. So this is getting the change to happen. So I would say now it is slightly better than when I started, like the early days when I started.
Thank you so much for that, Vrinda. I mean, it's both astonishing to hear, the things that get said on playgrounds across India, but at the same time, even more astonishing and inspiring is to see how, stars like yourself and everybody else on this panel just get. Dr. Sridhar, I'm going to come to you with an audience question, if that's okay with you. Is that fine with you?
Yes, yes.
Great. So the question comes from Pranav Subramanian. I hope I pronounced that right. So based on your interactions with cricketers and other sports people in Australia and the systematic support that is available for them, what do you feel that Indian sports federations can incorporate within our system to create more opportunities for people to enter sports psychology?
Okay, so I think that's a very interesting question. And I think something that is what we've been hearing in the panel and also what's happening at the collective is this recognition for mental health. And I have to mention this one, something that Mr. Prakash Padukone told me. This was when I was doing my PhD, and he said, I didn't have my PhD still. So he said, Chaitanya, at that time, we didn't have, sports science, sports psychology, but we still did well. Now there's so much support, but what's happening, right? And this is a question what I must have heard 10 years back. And I really, chew on it, is I think what we're talking now and just what the discussion was going was acknowledging that there is the mental aspect to the physical, and also how are we supporting the athletes, right? So I'll give you this one example which came across in my own PhD. This cricketer, he said, we perform, there's so much of image management that we do that finally when we actually are at home and something's happening, we can't respond. So now this comes to the question of like, how much are we recognizing the need for mental health, the need for support? Mental health is one aspect, it's broader, but this need for connection, right? I want to bring in this one definition which has very, very much impacted me, which is what is safety. And Dr. Poe just gives this. He said it's not just the absence of threat, but it's the presence of connection. So each one over here, I'm sure, is influencing people, right? I'm sure whether it's, Neha, whether it's anyone here, when you're working, whether it's Navnita, we've worked together previously, we're all influencing. The question becomes, they think it's magic. I'm very sorry to say, I think in Indian sports, it's still seen as it's a quick fix. And I think I myself, when I started my career, I used to think psychology is the cherry on the cake. And then you realize that no, psychology is, groundwork. So I think the need to recognize that there's so much of conscious, it's not like the example you were giving, Jonathan, this man up. And that's what you hear, people are breaking down and they say, get over it. People don't know the difference between anxiety, which is tipping to the clinical, and they don't know that they're actually not even in the body. Sometimes, Geet Seti gives this beautiful example, which I know we don't have the time to get into, where a snooker player, from a winning, he loses it. This is, I think, Watana. So he asks him what happened. From a 9-0, he loses the tournament. So he says, my mind ran away. And he says, why didn't you bring it back? So he says, I thought I let it for 1 second. So, the question is, people think, oh, just be strong, do this. It's become very cognitive. It's very top down. And, I think all of us have been at some level of sport over here. We know that it's not just talk. What do you mirror? So the question becomes, see, the seniors, they worked it around. But if we can recognize this need for connection, this need for support, and get in this system, not as a just, sometimes I feel it's like the thadka. You have a sports psychologist, that's all. It's just a namesake, but the point is, it's more than that. Will you acknowledge, will you, like I worked with some teams where they really included you, and that's where you can see the difference, where you have like from the top down, the leadership group, if they're not for it, that's it. So I actually refuse to work with teams or leagues or anything for that matter, where, they just want you just for the sake of it, or they want you to come and fix something in the end. So I really feel, in a nutshell, to put it, I think the need to recognize that it's an integral aspect of sport. So have them. And when the whole management is open, that will trickle down, especially the coach and head coach, because then the players are going to open up. So I think it's still very, very niche. It's a question which requires a very lengthy answer, but I really tried to bring it in a nutshell.
No, I don't envy your job, Dr. Sridhar, because just like psychology, just like the field you are in, that's a very complex question, right? And like you said, and we've had panelists here who have, unfortunately, because it's sport and because it's so reactionary and everything is so quick and everything is a 0.01 second away, all of you panelists have been put in positions where you have to fix something right now. And unfortunately, it's not about the problem that occurred at this moment. It's because of the rot that has happened over the course of many years, or I would say. The next question, we're going to take a slightly different tack. The next question is to Neha Aggarwal. This is from Ria Awate. Awate. I hope I pronounced your name right, Ria. She's asked the question in Hindi, but if I speak in Hindi, then probably the Zoom app will shut down. So I'm going to translate it in English, if that's okay with you, Neha. Which is, her question is, for graduation in sports management, is there a particular age you have to start preparing from, right? Because like I mentioned, in our culture, you have usually it's engineering or becoming a doctor, which were primarily the two big, or even becoming an accountant, which were primarily the 3 or 4 big careers. And you almost start preparing much earlier. You almost start preparing, some people as early as the 10th grade, for instance. Is there, now that sports management and the education around it has evolved, is there that kind of preparation that is required for a graduation in sports management, or isn't there?
I think the basic preparation that you need to do is, until you've got your got into the college, is that you need to know sport very well. Because if you're not passionate about sport, if you don't know the teams, if you don't understand say what Olympic sport is, if you don't know who's India's how many medals did India win at the 2012 or 2016 Olympics, right? You would not, it wouldn't make sense for you. So first thing is to understand that you're passionate about sport. Until now, if you were to ask me this question, say 5 years back, ki I'm passionate about sport, do I go for a sport management degree? Should I make a career in sport? I would have my doubts. But now, as we are evolving, I feel like there's so much scope of work that's there within the sports industry, hence the need to do a degree in sports management. Thus, I don't believe any formal education or a preparation, say for an engineering, is needed as such. You need to understand sport very well. But what I mentioned earlier is that if you've had prior experience, even if you just graduate, you get your bachelor's, right, and then you spend 1 or 2 or 3 years on the field, right, that experience is what will enhance your degree, your master's degree, and further then help you in getting a better job within the sports industry, because nobody wants to take raw folks, and because it'll again be very hard to coach them within sport. It's not what say you're sitting in a call center and there is set processes, you need to just execute it. That's not how the sports industry works. You need to do a lot more things than just doing your particular core job, because the industry is so niche, we are evolving. That means we have the opportunity to do much more than what our particular job looks like. So I really suggest, if someone wants to get into sports management, hustle, right, do your networking, talk to people, understand what the industry looks like, gain your knowledge. There are a couple of good schools now in India who are offering management degrees, but more than that, I think if you can secure some or the other assignment or a project or an internship with any of these companies, that would be the most valuable for you to take to make your decision on your next career path that you would potentially want to take.
Thank you, Neha. Next question is once again from Pranav Subramanian, and I think this question he hasn't specified who the question is for, but I'll take it. I'll get both Navnita and Vrinda to address this question, although Vrinda has actually addressed it in some way. But I'll start with Navnita. I'm going to read the question out. The question is, umpires have to travel across countries and extreme temperature changes. Irrespective of the temperature or conditions, the umpire's performance has to be perfect. How important do you think conditioning and physiotherapy is for umpires based on your experience?
So it is very, very important. Like, we have to be able to acclimatize quickly, because sometimes we're going from one place to another within 1 or 2 days. Luckily, for the last couple of events that's been happening for me, it's pretty much in one spot, because of a bio bubble restriction. So there wasn't a lot of travel, but I agree, in terms of conditioning, it needs to be very optimal for us as well. Hydration needs to be very important for us, and we have to be fit to make sure the other guys and the other teammates that we work with are also good, right? If for example, as a therapist, if I'm not fit at all, I won't be able to take care like the 15 to 20 people that are on the team. So it's essential that we are fit mentally and being really strong as well, and to help out the others also that are in.
Great, thank you. Vrinda, you want to take the same question? We obviously addressed it in some slight way a little earlier, but maybe if you could share what are some of the things that you do as an umpire, because players can always say, I can take it off and I can sit on the bench, so on and so forth. Unfortunately, not often umpires have that opportunity. So how do you get through this one, and what are things you do to acclimatize yourself through such extreme temperature changes?
So yes, I would say it's not just that particular moment when we have to start doing something. This really starts back when there's an off season, when you start training, so getting physically fit. And it is also combined with the food habits, your daily routines. Because when you keep traveling continuously, of course, the food changes. You won't get the same kind of water or the food which you are used to. So I also believe that these also play a vital role in getting used to the things, or you should know that what you should avoid before the match or what is not good for you for the match. So these are small things which we really need to understand of our own, because everybody has their own different way of treating their body. So it is very important. Like, yes, physically fit we have to be, otherwise these things won't be taken care of. but with that, we need to have a set routine. We need to have good food, eating habits, and probably staying hydrated. And to, I would say, I'm sorry, I'm not getting the word to come back physically fit. It actually helps you relax and it makes you ready for the next day probably. So you can like it gives you the time. If you're physically fit, I'll stand for 7 hours today. It's a 4-day game. I need to go, I need to relax and get going the next day. So this actually helps having a set routine, I would say.
That's critical. I think just like athletes who are at the top of the game, I realize umpires, referees, match officials have this things that they do from time to time. It's like taking one step at a day, one step at a time, every single day, so that you get into a flow state. As a matter of fact, Shweta, I'm going to ask you, and we'll wrap up after the question I have for you. And this is a question from me, so because I'm an audience as well, just as here. You know, the reality is being a sports journalist in India is as challenging as, if not, more challenging than any other sports career, right? In India. With the proliferation of technology and multiple available platforms, if a young aspiring journalist wants to say build a portfolio of work, because Neha mentioned that, even Navnita mentioned that, which is you need to have a certain skill set or maybe even a portfolio of offerings you can make to your future employer. As a journalist, what are some of the things you can advise young aspiring journalists to do on the multiple platforms available to them, other than just the journalism part of it, right? Is there some aspects that they can kind of enhance their portfolio by taking advantage of the current platforms we have?
So I think, just like Neha and everybody mentioned, once you step out into the field of journalism or sport, one of the most important things for everybody is you need to have passion and determination and a lot of patience. Your initial days are never going to be easy. You'll have a lot of on-ground training and everything. I think what works best is you always look out for opportunities and strive to be better at least each day. In a freelance setup, or rather any setup at this stage when the competition is so high, what is important is you are always a step ahead of what the current requirement is in that particular field. Also, I think one of the essential things is having an understanding of a subject and command over it. Before you kind of pitch an idea to, say, various publications, or you have your own research set in place, you gain a lot of knowledge, have a lot of sample articles, practice everything. And then once you pitch an article on a particular subject, your articles and stories have a lot of value to it. I think essentially, before even stepping into this field, what is very important is you have a lot of research that is done. You understand what your core competency or what your strong points are, what are your strengths, and how do you want to work on it.
Great. Thank you, Shweta. Thank you once again, Neha, Navnita, Shweta, Dr. Chaitanya, Vrinda, for being part of this panel. I'm still nervous, as a matter of fact. I'm sweating loads underneath because I told the gentleman who messaged me a little earlier, it's to be even working in sports management. It's great that we have women stars, women athlete stars, but we working in sports management in India as well. It requires a certain star level effort, and I really appreciate all of you for doing what you do, despite some of the thanklessness that gets thrown your way, unfortunately. The one takeaway I would encourage our participants to take from this panel, if you see the portfolio or you see the profile of each of these panelists that have been with us today, you realize that they bring a certain skill set and value to the table. They have something that, and their employer or their whoever's contracting them for that matter, that is a skill set that they can use. They can bring value to someone, and that is the takeaway from this entire panel, which is your passion is great, but your passion only works. Your passion is primarily there for the days you feel low, you don't feel like working. But the rest of the days, what takes you forward is your skill set, as Neha, Navnita, Dr. Chaitanya, Sridhar, Vrinda, and Shweta have mentioned. Thank you so much for allowing me to be your moderator and asking you questions. I hope all of you feel that I've extracted as much value as we could in 60 minutes. And thank you to SLPC for this opportunity, for bringing all of us together. Over to you, Yogita.
Jonathan, I just want to add, you did a really good job. So thank you.
I'm honored that you feel that way, Doctor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, and the whole panel. I think that entire discussion was extremely informative and have given all our viewers considering a career in sports plenty to take away. Thank you so much.